The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. We continue to make slight improvements to the tech situation, the remote tech situation. So last week we were dealing with close to a second and a half of delay. And today, Pat, we're closer to 1 second, which still is a little bit awkward, but at least we're going in the right direction, I feel like.
Yeah, and there hasn't been too much video lag either, which I'm quite happy about. Every now and then you'll get a little bit too erratic with your hand movements, and you'll start waving your hands everywhere, and we'll get a little bit of delay. But aside from that, I think we're doing pretty good.
Yeah, it's interesting because the technology uses, like I said, it's a Teradek system, and one of the things that it does in order to send video as efficiently as possible is if there are certain frames, certain parts of a frame that don't change from one fraction of a second to the next, it doesn't need to send that piece of the video in every frame. So for example, if you look at the painting that's behind me, if I don't cover any of the painting with my hand, other than the part that's covered with my head, it doesn't need to send every piece of the painting in all 30 frames every single second back to Pat in the studio. It can do it every third frame or something like that, and that drastically reduces the amount of bandwidth that's necessary. If I put my hand up and cover part of it and then move my hand back down, of course that increases the sort of number of pixels that have to be sent because they're changing from frame to frame. So what we figured out is that if I move a lot while we're taping, which I really would only do with my hands, that can sometimes cause a problem because physically I'm so far from the studio. But your report, Pat, is that it's looking good so far.
Yeah, it's a good thing we don't have Ben Dixon guest hosting while using a Teradek, because we wouldn't be able to get through the show. I think with his hand gestures, how erratic they are, there's just no way. It would freeze every couple frames.
Don't send Ben this bonus show, please. He might get offended. No, you're right. And I love Ben's gesticulation personally. So let's get to the news. A man died on Saturday in what's being called a possible shark attack in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, where I have gone in the water only up to my ankles because I hate cold water and I just don't force myself now that I'm an adult to go into really, really cold water. But I've been to Wellfleet, Massachusetts on Cape Cod many times. And the man has been identified only as a man in his 20s, died from injuries after rescuers pulled him out of the water, performed emergency first aid, including CPR. And it's being called a suspected shark attack. If it is ultimately confirmed, it would be the first death caused by a shark in Massachusetts since 1936. That's 100 minus 18, 82 years, according to sharkattackdata.com. Back in last month, a man was also bitten by a shark in a different beach in Cape Cod, but he survived the encounter. So this is horrible. It's absolutely horrible that this is going on. One of the things that happens culturally, Pat, every time there's a shark attack is similar to what happens when there is a plane crash, which is the sort of availability heuristic or availability bias, which is that when we have information available about a particular risk, we drastically overestimate the significance of that risk and react to it not in proportion with how dangerous it actually is. Statistically, you are not now any more likely to be bitten by a shark unless we believe that underlying conditions and the sort of number of sharks in the immediate beach area have increased. And that is sort of a cultural phenomena that exists with shark attacks. It exists with plane crashes. It exists when there's like a serial rapist or something like that. Doesn't mean any of those incidents aren't tragic or exist, but people drastically overestimate the risk.
Yeah, but there are also some people who say that there was a shark sighting within the past few weeks, so maybe it would have been in this person's best interest to stay out of the water, and whereas traveling by plane could be necessary for you to, visit family or to get a job or what have you, just going into the ocean to swim or surf isn't necessary. You're just doing it for fun. And some would argue that he should have stayed out of the water, he should have known better. I don't know. How do you feel about that? Because I've heard that from quite a few people.
That's like saying anyone who gets killed in a biking accident should never have been biking in the first place. Well, what about all the people that biked and didn't get hurt? What about all the people that went into the same water that same day and didn't get hurt? Did they do something just as wrong as what this guy did? I don't know that I buy that reasoning.
Yeah, and I don't think I'll change my behavior too. I love going to the beach. I don't go too far out, and I'm also not afraid of cold water like someone else on this program apparently is. I'm willing to just get into it, get used to it, and have a good time out there myself.
Yeah, I just am. I'm too sensitive to the cold water at this point, and it's such an effort to get in. And my stepmom is from northern Spain, where the water is freezing year round, and she'll go south of Boston and just get right in the water. But I am not. I mean, listen, it's not like the water is warm on the coast of Argentina where I grew up, but I just can't do it. It's just not worth the effort at this point. I feel like I'm just too old to be that uncomfortable, and I'm not aware of what the benefit is to forcing myself to go in.
Are you trying to inch yourself in, little by little and get acclimated that way? Because I always just jump right in and get the shock over with. And yeah, it sucks for like a few seconds, but then you're totally used to it.
I do the inch my way in method, and there are some critical points that you experience when you're doing that, which are particularly difficult. And so, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's not the best strategy.
I think I know what you're talking about.
All right. Spam phone calls. You know, Pat, that when I'm in the studio, my phone regularly rings, and they look like phone numbers from my home area code. And I guess in a sense they are, but they aren't actually people calling me. It's spammers who are spoofing their phone numbers or have routed their phone numbers through numbers that look familiar to me, or at least from my area code. There is a new report that says that by next year, more than half of phone calls are going to be spam or scam phone calls. And I'm not that surprised to hear it whatsoever. I think way more than half of the phone calls I get are spam. And at this point, I'm not making that many phone calls, and I definitely don't receive that many phone calls. It's mostly me making outbound calls when I need to call a company, a service provider, something like that. At this point, I would say probably 70 to 80% of the calls I receive are sales calls, spam calls, or straight up scam calls, the overseas technical support calls, the overseas IRS spam, etc. I think that this is the direction it's going, and something's going to have to break at some point, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that percentage is so high, because very few people are even making phone calls anymore, interpersonally. They'll just text or email. So 70, 80%, that's pretty high. You're getting to the point now where maybe it just makes sense never to answer your phone. A few years ago, I seldom received spam phone calls. Now I'm getting them quite a bit, and it's annoying, especially when they're disguised with like local area codes. Like if I see 617 or 774, which are the common area codes here in Boston, I think it's maybe someone I know or like a friend of a friend. And then when I get a spam call, I can't stand it. I absolutely can't stand it.
I do something which I'm going to look up now to give you an exact number, which I don't know if it actually makes a difference, but whenever I will get a call, and you know what, I don't even know where to actually look it up. Whenever I get a phone call that is spam, or a text, I'm also getting text message spam now, I will immediately block the number in my phone. I probably have several hundred numbers blocked, but what I'm told is that some people told me it doesn't make a difference because you're not actually getting a call from those numbers. You will get another call from the same scammer who has spoofed a different number, so that blocking it once won't make a difference. And if they're spoofing a number that's real, that someone might at some point call you from, you're blocking someone who might actually be calling you at some point in the future. So I've continued to do it, but I have no idea if it's actually useful.
When it's just an automated message, that's what irks me the most, because then you can't mess around with the caller, right? You can't just waste their time. When it's an actual person, I can kind of have some fun with that. And I think we've tried to have some fun with that on the show. We were about to start filming a bonus show at some point within the past year, and you got one of those spam callers, and we put them on the microphone. Here in Massachusetts, the two-party consent state, so I don't know if that was actually totally legal on our end, but we did it anyway.
Yeah, it's completely illegal when I do the thing where I record the telemarketing calls, but what I sort of tell myself, and I've checked with lawyers about this, when we've used those calls on the show, we will bleep out any identifying information about the person's name or the company they're calling from. So once you remove that, it's sort of like, listen, it could all be just fun and fake. And it would be very difficult for anybody to actually prove that they were recorded without their consent because you're not identifying the person. And when two lawyers told me that, I kind of felt okay about it.
It's kind of hilarious how the other person on the phone call is the one doing the spamming and the scamming, and yet we're the ones potentially in some legal jeopardy. That just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, I'm the one calling lawyers to see if it's okay. Let's talk about Jeff Bezos a little bit. Jeff Bezos is the Amazon founder and CEO. He's worth, who knows, $100 billion. It goes up and down very, very frequently, and $160 billion now. Okay, I stand corrected. And he had made an announcement a while ago that he wanted advice from his Twitter followers about how he should donate something like $2 billion. And he now has shared details about the effort. It's called the Day One Fund. But there are philanthropy experts who are still saying that it's all sort of short on information, and there's a lot of unanswered questions about how he's going to be giving away this $2 billion, including what's the structure, why is he only giving away $2 billion when he has $160 billion, although that question is less concerning to me. It's sort of like, if he wants to give away $2 billion and keep $158 billion, I can disagree with that. I can say, what on earth does he need $158 billion for? But it is ultimately his decision to make. But the lack of sort of disclosure and explanation as to the structure is making some people think that the transparency is very, very low, that he may be, quote, taking advice on Twitter, but really just listening to his friends in the world of philanthropy or who are even involved with charities and that type of thing. I understand being concerned about this, Pat, but at the same time, it's ranking low on my list of things to be concerned about.
I don't know. I mean, $160 billion, he could do a lot of good with that money if he chose to. Like, the cost of ending homelessness in the United States would only be $20 billion, so he could do that and still have $140 billion left over. I mean, that would be pretty nice. This comes to, I mean, I think of this as just a way to give out scraps in order to appease people who are attacking him on this for not being charitable enough. It's kind of the same thing when the Koch brothers give money to the arts, or when Walmart has a drive for their own employees, or gives that yodeling boy $50,000 for a college scholarship. I think it's just lip service more than anything else. He should, I think, be giving a lot more to charity.
Well, that's a fair criticism. I think that there are fair criticisms and less fair criticisms here. So, for example, Bezos is being criticized that he's only focusing on homelessness and preschools, but he's not focusing on a whole bunch of other issues. I don't know that that's really a fair criticism. I mean, people do have agency. They can decide what it is that is important to them and where they want to focus. The critique that he's not giving enough is sort of in the middle. I mean, okay, he's giving $2 billion now. He said in a recent interview he might give away more, but it's a somewhat fair criticism. A very fair criticism is that the structure is not transparent. And if you're going to do this and you're saying I'm taking ideas on Twitter, you should have some kind of established guidelines that you explain. And to be perfectly honest, I think very soon we're going to hear what those guidelines are from Bezos, because there have been a lot of calls for it. Okay, one more show. I will be here in Paris. Then I will be traveling back to the United States. We will have Farron Cousins guest hosting on Wednesday, much to many of your delight and dismay, depending on who it is that is listening right now. And then the plan is, if all happens on schedule, if my travel happens the way it's supposed to, I will be back in studio on Thursday, and then I will be in studio for a while until I broadcast from Mike Papantonio's Mass Torts Made Perfect conference in Las Vegas. But that's weeks and weeks away. That's it for today's bonus show. Thanks for joining me. Hello to all of the new members, nearly 200 of you since last week. Thanks to our massive membership promo. I will talk to you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.